We're now going to go from knitting in the round to knitting flat. We're going to get a second stitch marker, count all the stitches, and find the midpoint. So we're going to split these stitches in two. We have 80 stitches. So we're going to count out 40 stitches and put a stitch marker. So 40 plus 40 is 80. We now have two markers designating the sides of this garment. And count again. It doesn't hurt to count twice, so just make sure that you have 40 and 40. So we're going to start knitting flat. Not only that, we're going to have some decreases in there as well. And you see that tail end? This is how you know your that stitch marker designates a new round. So knit one and then do SSK. So it's a way to decrease stitches. You slip 2 stitches and then you knit them together. This is a left leaning decrease. And the rest of the stitches are just knit. So you keep knitting until you get to that stitch marker. When you are 3 stitches away from this next stitch marker, we're going to stop. Okay, so 3 stitches before the next stitch marker. We're going to have another decrease in here, but this time using knit 2 together, which is a right leaning decrease. And then the last stitch is just a knit. We're no longer knitting in the round, so that means we're not going that way. No, we're stopping and we're going to turn around and purl. So we turned around. So just flip your knitting, and now we are going to knit that front of the tank top. This is going to be a purl row. It's no longer a round because we're not knitting in the round, we're knitting flat. So this is a row, not a round. We're basically going to knit the front and the back of the tank top separately now. But we're continuing doing a stockinette stitch. When you're knitting a stockinette stitch in the round, you're just doing knit stitch for every round. When you're doing stockinette and you're knitting flat, you have to alternate the knit rows and purl rows. So keep doing purl stitches until you get to the stitch marker. Okay, so we hit the stitch marker and we stop. We're not continuing. No more knitting in the round. We're going to knit flat. So flip your knitting and see, you can kind of see that there's a little gap in there. So it's not continuous anymore. you can clearly see kind of the beginning of that front panel, and we're going to keep going with knitting the front panel. We're knitting flat. Next row is pretty much the same. It's going to be a decrease row. So we are going to decrease one stitch at the beginning and one stitch at the end. First stitch is a knit stitch, and then we have a decrease using SSK, so slip slip knit, which is a left leaning decrease. See, the stitches are leaning to the left. Then we keep knitting the stitches in between. We are going to stop when we get to 3 stitches before the next stitch marker. We're almost there, so 3 stitches remain. Knit 2 stitches together. This is a decrease, but this one is a right leaning decrease. Right leaning. Last stitch is a knit stitch, and you can see that little gap there. So with every row that you knit, it becomes more and more prominent.